I'm Lynn.
I'm Amanda.
And this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We're cutting through the fluff and cracking open what it really takes to build a business and life that you actually want.
No gurus, no gatekeeping, just real talk, big action, and the badass energy you need to scale and slay.
Some episodes, it's just us.
And sometimes we bring on powerful guests with stories that'll hit home.
Either way, this is not about playing small.
It's about going all in.
Let's get after it. Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. You know we love to talk about sales. We love it so much. We wrote a whole book on it. And today we're talking specifically about sales cycles. What is a sales cycle? How does it affect your business? And how can you use it to your advantage?
There's so many different definitions of sales cycle. There's the external, so like your industry sales cycle and kind of the ebbs and flows with it. There's your internal. And I feel like there's also like, so internal in general, annual, we'll say sales cycle, but then also kind of like your own ebbs and flows, which could be monthly, it could be quarterly, but sales cycle, it's the process of all the sums of the sale and all the different parts of it, but also the incoming and the outgoing, or I should say the sale itself.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about taking your prospect from knowing that you exist to giving you money and becoming a ideally long-term paying customer. And I think that where people go wrong in a sales cycle is sales cycles to me are what keep your business from feeling like you're winging it all the time. Like if you're in a sales cycle and you know it's coming, it makes your income more predictable because you know it's coming up, and there are, lead generations and all sorts of things you can do. But ultimately, if you don't know that cycles exist in your business and how they exist in your business, then you're leaving money on the table. You're making it much more difficult to find predictable income, and it's going to always feel like you're winging it in your sales game. Like you never know where money's coming from. You never know when it's going to come. Is this a good month? Is this a bad month? So knowing what your sales cycle is will help with that churn. It's going to help you bring people in consistently and to understand where they are in their sales cycle, like where they are in the client journey and how long that takes to close them. And it's a lot of things, but ultimately, it's your prospect journey. Like how are you going to close the sale? There's a cycle there. Even if you don't acknowledge it, and even if you didn't consciously make it, there is a sales cycle there.
Absolutely. So talking about your personal sales cycle, really it's a system, it's a process, right? Your sales process would be a word that we would often use here. And like Amanda said, when you're going to conversations or they are in the market and there's some kind of knowledge of they might want to purchase your product, there's a need, to the time you close, and then they go into nurturing, or that they're in more of a holding nurturing pattern because they're not necessarily an immediate in the thick of the sales cycle. But there is a difference also too, which they all kind of like stack upon one another, like Legos or like a puzzle, like the marketing and prospecting cycles of what we do. And that feeds your sales cycle. Because in my personal opinion, and it depends on who you speak with, when we can separate them, because a lot of times people will blend them, then I feel like they should be separated, because otherwise people are saying, well, I'm doing all of the sales things, I'm doing all of the things, and all they're doing is half-ass marketing and putting posts out there. And that's prospecting, that's building know, like, trust, but that isn't like, there's no awareness, there's no need, or creating the need, or planting the need, or uncovering the need. There's none of that. So there's no conversation. So to me, they're two separate things. But yeah, it's a system. And if your sales process or sales cycle is willy-nilly or just chaotic, you're not going to get as much purchases, and then they're not going to become your client.
I think recently, like in the last, say 20 years, just to keep myself the space for it, I think they're not linear anymore. So with the onslaught of online businesses and the way social media works, like people can bounce around and it can happen very quickly. So these sales cycles don't take as long in a lot of cases as they used to, because people see things at such a rapid amount, just a rapid speed. I mean, if I say something randomly in passing, an ad's going to pop up on my phone that next day, that same day, and then I'm going to see 15 Instagram stories on it the next day. So like things are happening a little bit faster. So the sales cycles can change very quickly. But I think ultimately there are stages, and we've talked about it a little bit here, but stages of the sales cycle. So you've got your lead generation, your prospecting, like just looking for customers. That's kind of that.
Yeah.
Like looking out, and then you've got to qualify them. Like, are they a good fit? Are you the solution for their problem? Are they making enough money to afford? Like if I'm Louis Vuitton, I'm not going to be marketing to somebody who's in a lower income bracket. So like, are they you have to qualify them, and then you're going to nurture them. You're building trust. You're, looking at their objections. You're showing the value of what you have. You've got lead generation, you've got qualification. Then you're going to nurture them, because there's no point nurturing somebody who's never going to buy your product because they don't qualify. And then it's the making the offer. It's the sales email. It's the proposal. It's the pitch. It's all those things. Then you're trying to close them. And then whether or not you close them, there's still follow-up or retention. I mean, if you close them, obviously it's retention, but there's still going to be follow-up after that. So like, that's like your sales cycle in a nutshell. So when you're looking at your sales cycle as an individual business, what is fitting into each of those categories? How are you getting new prospects and new lead generation? How are you qualifying them to make sure that they actually fit into your company values and what you're offering? Like, are they the right fit? Are they part of your ideal clients? Then how are you nurturing them and building trust? How are you presenting and how often? So, I can't tell you how many times I'll ask a client, when's the last time you sent a sales email? When's the last time that you sold something? And they're like, oh yeah, well, I mentioned it 6 months ago, or I told them I sell that 2 months ago. I'm like, people, you got to tell them, you got to talk about, we have a whole podcast on talking about what you sell. So we'll go listen to that one. And then you're looking to close them. And then there's follow-up. There's always going to be follow-up, or at least there should always be follow-up at the end of your cycle.
Just had that conversation with the realtors this morning. That was their biggest takeaway, is following up after the sale, and following up even not after the sale. I love all of your old school parts. For me, it's like a simplified version of a sales process or sales cycle would be the source. So any and all of the sources, all the conversations. So that would be the meeting, the this, the that, the ask. So this is where you're like, you want to buy or not? And then they go into the back. So if they're a client, obviously the retention side, but it's a follow-up, right? So the 4 parts: source, conversations, or I think you call them presentations, ask, and then the follow-up. And you can break it up into little chunks in between in each of them, but it's you're prospecting, your sources, your lead gen. It's important to know. And all I can think about is like when we used to sell franchises, when I was COO, and he wanted me to sell franchises via LinkedIn campaign. And like, it was very clear, 2 weeks we gave ourselves. There was definitely the prospect or the source, right? And that was our team doing a campaign and doing some manual and some automated things to gather a certain type of prospect. And once they agreed to have a conversation, that's when the conversations started. And we had up to 4 conversations. Mind you, the franchises start at 50,000 USD, but my CEO wanted us to close it within 3 conversations, but 4 was the max, but it was all within a 2-week span. And if they bought, great, then they went into the next process and then the follow-up and the retention. If they didn't buy, or they didn't make a commitment after 2 weeks, then they went into a nurturing sequence. And that included social media to kind of back it up and different things like that. And so at the end of the day, like Amanda said, if you do not have it mapped out, then you are failing yourself, and you don't know, you're kind of just shooting in the dark when problems arise or when you're not closing. You don't really truly know your ROI, your return on investment, because you don't really know. You're just guesstimating. Maybe like through your calendar, you're guesstimating, but how much time you're spending on this, how much time you're spending on that, you are letting things fall through the cracks if you don't have that sales process, that sales cycle written out. And then going back to something I said earlier is there are different versions of a sales cycle, because then if you take like the industry sales cycle and like the ebbs and flows and add that on to already your broken or inadequate kind of sales cycle not written out, it's only going to make things more complex and harder because you don't have a foundation that you've built your sales process on. You're just willy-nilly in it. So when the market crashes or when this happens or when that happens, it's super important. Yeah. I'll let you talk because I want to come back to the follow-up.
No, I think that along those lines, that tracking matters. Like, you have to know
Absolutely
what your cycle is, because how are you going to know where they're falling off? Like, are they falling off in the prospect stage, in the building trust stage, or are they falling off in the close? Like, how can you fix the leaks if you don't know where they're coming from, like which pipe is leaking? So knowing what's happening and tracking all that information can make a huge difference, because if they're going all the way through your sales cycle and then they're bailing out at the close, then you know that you need to fix the close. If they're bailing out in that first email of the welcome sequence, then that's where you need to be adjusting things. And then you see how it trickles down. But if you don't track it, you're just guessing. You're always guessing. It's always just like, I don't know what happened. I don't know why they didn't sign on. And I think that's always really surprising to me when I'll ask a client, okay, well, what was their objection? Like, what was the reason that they said they didn't want to do your offer? And they're like, well, I didn't even ask. Like, I don't know why they didn't close. I don't know what the reason is. I don't know where they fell off in the cycle. And that's information that you can use to your advantage, because if you know the common objection, if you know what the sticking point is on your offer, that can be part of helping your sales cycle regenerate. If you know that it's always that everybody always falls up at this one point, then that's what you're fixing. But again, if you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
I love that you always bring it back to more of an online sales cycle. And it's funny, it just had a moment, like the majority of your clients come from that now, except for your brick and mortar. I don't know about that. But do you remember the days where it wasn't so much of the virtual side?
Yes.
And the same things apply. Like, I think I'm taking more of a position from non-automated, and which you want to automate stuff, but more face-to-face. But I do love that you brought it back to that. I do want to point out something, because you brought it up in like, if they're falling off on the email where you're trying to convert them, then, and we actually had this, we have a sales process and email a sequence, and we have a full sales process, but the email sequence is part of our sales process inside promoting like the BA, the Badass Amplifier. And we realize in one of our launches, we saw, because we evaluate every time and we improve it, right? And we saw that like 80% were dropping off on this one particular email. I can't remember what launch it was for. I know it wasn't that long ago. Yeah.
It was for Manila.
And so we did a little bit of like evaluation. So this was a 6-day live event of like, why would that be happening? Now, some of it is our guesstimate, but also it could be getting outside resources, because it was a new market of how to change this around. So I think that's really important, that you're asking in a way that your audience needs to hear, but also that you're building up value that whole time, regardless if it's on or offline. But don't forget to ask. Like, so many people do not ask. And this is where you think you asked, and then you lose them because they feel like, this person's leading me on, like, should have get off the pot type of thing, like pull the trigger already. And if you're not asking it in a way that they can hear, or a way that adds value to them, or if you're not asking it at all, then it's not going to happen as often. And so many people forget or hesitate at the ask. So do not forget to ask.
I want to go over some of the common mistakes people make in their sales cycle that I think we hear way too often. And I will say some of them. Number one is not asking, but also assuming that no is the final answer, and that the second they say no, you try to backtrack. Like, oh, I no isn't the final answer, and no doesn't mean never, just means not right now. I think that's one that people at the end of their sales cycle, they assume that no means no forever. I think people don't follow up enough. The no following up, I generally speaking, and it's probably more now or maybe even less, I don't know, that sales happen after multiple sales, multiple touch points. Like it's, most people aren't impulse buying everything. I mean, this isn't, you're not all at the cash register buying a stick gum. Sales take longer than that. So most business owners will stop after one or two touch points. Like they'll give up at that following up, but I have plenty of evidence that people will buy after 5, 6, 20, 30 touch points later. They will actually come back into your
Five to 7,
system.
and now it's double, I think.
Yeah, it's great. Well, because there's so many, I mean, people are inundated with information now, but it's 5 to 7 was the old school way. And I still stick by that. I still, and again, even if they say no after the 7th, they're not leaving my CRM. I'm not never talking to them again. They're still in there because there's always that follow-up opportunity.
Unsubscribe.
Unless they unsubscribe, but that's different.
Yeah.
That's a never. That's a no means never. I'm talking about the people who just kind of like sit in there.
Yeah.
And they like your stuff every 3 months, but they never actually buy anything. Like they're still in there. I think that's, and I think overcomplicating is another one. And I know you had a client that was overcomplicating their system, and like, it doesn't always have to be 50 steps just because you like to hear 50 steps. Maybe somebody else just wants 2 steps. So I think that's another big one.
Yeah, definitely. I think we have to understand our own behavioral style and then our own nuances. I actually just had this conversation this morning in the Q&A aspect of the training with the realtors, but yeah, that's what you like, but is that what your clients like? And yeah, I think also with that, the overcomplication is not having clarity in what you're selling and the confidence. So I think those C's again. I feel like another mistake is people pitch too early. They pounce.
Skipping steps.
Yeah. And, there is the traditional sales model, and then there's the trust sales model. The traditional sales model is you're barely building trust. Then you're just throwing out plans and services, and then you're overcoming objections. Where the other one, it's the other way, and you're building trust. And you can do this virtually. You can do this through your email sequence. I mean, people that are just kind of peering in on Amanda because she's really good at this through her social media and her emails, every email that she sends, that they're just kind of gazing and post is hopefully building more trust. So eventually they'll come. And then the middle part of that upside down triangle would be creating solutions based on their needs. I think that's another thing that we didn't even talk about is like, do they even have a need? And then the last is the tipping point. So don't pitch early, don't pounce. Yeah, it's a no-go. I think another thing, I want to go back to follow-up because that was actually one of the takeaways from the realtors this morning was because we talked a little bit about sales funnel, sales process, cycle, whatever. And that follow-up and follow through and like how to do that. And one of the individuals was like, well, I don't like I avoid the guy when I go to church, the greeter who shakes everybody's hand. And I don't like it when I get the email from this company or this company, hey, it's your birthday. It's too generic. And I was like, wow, I always use my Sephora points during my birthday month. And I love a free Starbucks. I love a free Starbucks, but I get what he was saying. He's like, I want it to be more personal. Great. That's actually better. But if you're not doing it, then start somewhere. So if you have to automate it or put it into a system and not always be, because then it becomes expectation. I think, the anniversary of buying the house is a good thing, but not every time or whatever, but that follow up, people don't follow up, and you can get a lot of referrals. You can actually get upsells. You can have better retention for that. That's part of your sales cycle. That's part of your client journey as well. But that's the sales cycle in your client journey because they're already your client journey. And I would also say one other thing, and this drives me effing crazy. And this isn't just in the sales cycle, but you definitely want to watch it in the sales cycle because with sales cycles, you want to make sure that you're planting just a bunch of green flags. The second you start planting little subconscious red flags, it's going to be harder for you to sell to them. And one of the things that drives me batshit crazy is like industry jargon or like certain language that is going to make your client And that goes to the clarity point as well. But that makes your client literally scratch their head and be like, WTF, like, what was that? I don't understand. And that's planting little red flags that's going to hurt your conversion, period.
Yes, it's definitely the tighter and clearer your sales cycle, the more predictable your revenue is going to be. And I want to say one thing that I feel like every person I've ever talked to about sales who wasn't a salesperson, just like normal business owners, you're not being pushy. Okay. Pushing, like getting somebody to go through your sales cycle isn't pushy. You're just guiding them through the decision that they're going to make anyway, whether they make it with your company or a different company. If they have a problem and you're the solution, they're going to make that decision, whether they do it with you or somebody else. So you're not being pushy. You're guiding them on a decision. And it's only sleazy if you are sleazy. Sales is not sleazy. Sales is not pushy. That is if you are pushy, if you are sleazy. And you mentioned it before, like don't jump for the sale. That's what makes it feel pushy. If you're going to never like not try to build any trust, not try to see if they even qualify, you're just trying to like get the sale. That's what's pushy. That's what's sleazy and creepy. Sales is not creepy. It is essential for your business. It is what makes your business keep going. So if anybody thought that at any point during this podcast, I need you to get it out of your head because Absolutely. Sales is essential. It is the lifeblood of your company and it's only creepy if you are.
Yeah. A couple more that I just thought of that I can't believe we didn't say this first is when you ask for the sale, you shut your mouth. Like that's a big mistake. People just ramble on, they continue. No, ask for the sale, shut your mouth. And I would say this is obviously more like if I'm trying to sell Amanda and asking her for the yes. But there's also ways to do this virtually. Like don't over explain, don't justify, don't ramble through it. You need to be clear and just like ask for the sale and be direct. Don't just ramble. They don't
need every tiny little bit of information about your company and your product and your services forever in order to make their decision.
And don't project. I think that that's another mistake. A lot of times people will say, oh, they can't afford it, or, oh, they're too busy for this, or they're already this. Why are you projecting? Let them say no. Let them say yes. Let them say not now. Let them ask the questions. But I think that those, I'd like kick myself in the ass if I didn't say those before we ended the
and one more. We could talk about sales forever. Read the book. It came up in a client call this morning. Like just because they say a common objection doesn't mean that that's really what's happening. Like saying like, I don't have time and I don't have money is what everybody says. It's like a reflex almost. Like it's like can you take the call? They're like, oh, I'm busy right now. Like that's a reflex. That's not actually what's happening. So trying to break down their objections and break down that part of the cycle. Again, that's part of looking at your analytics and tracking what it is they're actually objecting to. Because if you don't really ask the questions, you're never going to know the answer and you're always going to be assuming everything. And that's really not going to work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, objections are they're so knee jerk, more so now than what they were because people are just bombarded and overstimulated, period. So man, we could go on forever and ever.
We could go on for a long time. Yeah. We do love sales.
Yeah. So we'd love to know like what parts that you feel like we're missing, some of the things that you would add to this podcast. Leave your comments below.
And pick up a copy of our sales book, Pursuit of Badasserie, the sales edition. If you have more questions about sales,
on Audible.
We are happy to answer sales questions. So if you have a question about sales, drop it. I'll tell you a thing or two.
Absolutely. Share this with somebody in your network who you feel would want to hear this particular podcast. And again, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. We release a new podcast every single week on different topics. And if there's a topic that you want to hear, go ahead and also DM us. We will make sure, even if it's not in our wheelhouse, we'll bring somebody on who could talk about it. So,
all right. Until next time,
get after it. Thanks for tuning in. But remember, listening is not doing.
Take what you heard today and move.
Share the episode, leave us a review, and tag us when you take action.
Head over to thepursuitofbadasserie.com and see how we're helping entrepreneurs get results without the fluff.
Until next time,
let's get after it.